Hello, my name is Michelle Gleason and I'm the chair of the Finance Council. The Finance Committee decided that with COVID still present in our community and in an effort to reach the widest audience possible, we would follow the same approach we took last year and report to the parishioners the 2021 financial situation by means of this video. I would encourage you to either have a PowerPoint presentation slide beside you or to use the split screen on your computer in order to follow along as I go through this presentation. I will make references to slide numbers as a place marker while I am presenting. Slide 2 is the table of contents. That's a listing of the topics that I will briefly cover today. Slide 3, the membership of the Finance Council. St. Basil's is very fortunate to have such a committed group of individuals. There's a solid corporate history with this committee. We are blessed with the excellent benefit of having a multitasked and multivaried skill set of individuals. There are individuals on this committee with extensive business and public sector experience, management excellence, engineering, legal, and finance backgrounds. We have had only one change since last year. We said goodbye to Jason Faquette. He served on the Finance Council for many years and was a very valued contributor. Thank you very much, Jason. And we welcome Nick Ogrodnik as the newest member of the Finance Council. On behalf of the parish, I would like to thank each Finance Council member for their contributions to this ministry. Slide 4 is on the governance. The governance structure under which our committee operates is the Protocol for Parish Financial Administration document, and it was published by the Archdiocese in 2011. This document covers the areas of responsibility for the Finance Committee and how we are to operate. It identifies elements such as the frequency of meetings, who and how we are to sign checks, the process for bank reconciliation, etc. And one of the items in the protocol document relates to reporting. We as a committee must not only report to the Archdiocese on our financial situation, but we must report to you, the parishioners of the parish. The key role of the Finance Council is to work with the pastor in providing financial oversight on the financial administrations of the parish. Slide 5 is on revenues. This slide identifies the various categories of revenue received from parishioners in 2021. For example, how much we received in collections, special envelopes, building funds, etc. As the slide says, St. Basil's is a very generous parish. 370,000 of the total 471,000 in revenues collected this year stems directly from parishioners' contributions. The two largest components are Sunday collections at $201,000 and the capital building fundraising at $124,000. This represents 87% of the total $370,000 in contributions. This is followed also by various special types of collections, which total $44,000. Things such as special envelopes for the parish and for the Archdiocese. St. Basil's also has revenues from other sources, namely $43,000 in various rental monies and interest earned, as well as $57,000 that we received this year as COVID relief assistance from the federal government. I'd like to thank you very much for your generosity in all of these contributions. However, a key point to note here is that we have to be mindful of how these monies collected correspond to the actual expenses incurred in 2021, and I'll discuss that in further detail. Slide 6 on the balance sheet is a snapshot of St. Basil's comparative balance sheets for 2021 and 2020. At the end of 2021, the parish had $827,000 in total assets, with approximately $115,000 in liabilities and $712,000 in surplus equity. Assets represent something of value that the organization owns. In our case, current assets, which are cash on account or accounts receivable, totaled $90,000. And we have an endowment fund of CIBC shares, which total $368,600. You'll note in the comparative balance sheet that in 2020, the CIBC shares were $271,800, and I'll speak to that difference shortly. We have investments on account at the Archdiocese, which total $368,000, and we earn approximately 4% interest on those monies. In 2021, the interest earned was $12,700. A key point to note here is that the more we have to dip into our investments on account at the Archdiocese to pay our parish bills, the less interest revenue we will generate. Liabilities represent any debt we owe to others. And in our case, that is made up of accounts payable that we owe suppliers at the end of when we closed our books at December 31st. And it's also money we hold on account for various groups within the parish. For example, monies that are held in account for the Refugee Fund, social action, or pastoral outreach are a few of those examples. Equity represents the value to the organization after we subtract all of our debts, i.e. our liabilities, from our assets. For St. Basil's at the end of 2021, our equity account totaled $712,000. Now that does not mean we can go out and spend that $712,000 and that it's all available to the parish. The bulk of these monies in the equity account are earmarked for specific purposes. And on the next slide, I'll go into a little more detail on the specifics of that equity account. The $712,000 in equity on slide 7 is made up of two basic components. First, $284,000 in funds available for general purposes. This is the source of funds that we currently use to fund the ongoing operations of our parish or to cover any deficits we might experience. It's also one of the key sources of money for which we receive our approximate 4% interest from the Archdiocese, as I mentioned. I also previously mentioned, but it's very important and it bears repeating, that the more we draw down on these monies to cover any operating deficits the parish has, the less we earn in interest revenue. And any shortfall as a result must be made up from other sources of revenue, either by increasing the Sunday collections or by generating different types of revenues. The second component of the equity account is $427,000 worth that is in designated reserved for specific purposes monies. Of that amount is the $368,600 that are our CIBC shares that were donated from a very generous benefactor. These securities have very specific stipulations attached to them. We cannot touch the principal, we can only spend the dividends or interest earned from these shares. And in 2021, that interest income totaled $14,600. These monies cannot be spent on covering parish operations cost, and they are earmarked specifically for parish charitable activities, such as mission and social justice, social action, and pastoral outreach. The balance of the specified purpose account is $59,000, which represents the residual monies on account from our capital fundraising campaign. So in summary, of the $712,000 in equity, approximately 60% of these monies are held for specific purposes, and the balance is available for general purpose use. On slide 8, just a few points on the accessibility and hospitality campaign. As you will recall, it was launched in 2018, and its objective was to purchase a new boiler, to install heat in our parish basement, to install a new lift in the church, and to replace and or repair the roofs in both the rectory and the parish office. At the end of December 2021, the parish had successfully been able to raise $460,000 with $1,000 required. Thank you all very much for your generous contributions. We're on the home stretch with this initiative. All of the major projects have now been completed. There is still some residual electrical work that needs to be completed, and that's targeted to be completed by the end of this summer. You'll note on the slide, we still have just over $70,000 to raise to cover all of these major capital costs and to replenish our major capital reserve account. I want to take a moment here and give you a recent example as to why it's important to have a major capital reserve account. You may remember last summer where we had a quasi sinkhole that developed in the church parking lot. That was an unforeseen cost, and the repairs to that totaled $17,500. So without a capital reserve account, the source of funds to cover these types of expenditures come from general operating monies. It would be very much appreciated if all parishioners could make a conscious effort to maximize an additional donation to complete this capital fundraising campaign and to help us get over the finish line with these initiatives. On slide 9, the income statement. There are a few points to raise from our income statement perspective. You see a snapshot of St. Basil's comparative income statement for both 2021 and the previous year, 2020. This slide reflects all the revenues and all of the expenditures, including our major capital projects that were incurred during this past year. You'll notice a line item that says unrealized revenue of $96,825. This represents the increase in the market value of the CIBC shares that I mentioned previously. In other words, the shares have raised in value from $271,000 to $386,000 in this past year. Now, that does not mean we have an extra $96,000 to spend. Rather, this is an accounting transaction only, where we must recognize the increased value of those shares, and it is reported on our income statement. You'll notice on the income statement the revenue components that I spoke about previously in terms of how generous the parish has been. Operating expenditures for running the parish totaled $286,600 this year. Our major capital project expenses incurred in 2021 were $150,600, with the most significant expense being the roof replacements. The 2021 year-end surplus was $86,100, but that included the unrealized revenue gain on the market shares, and it also included $57,000 in increased COVID assistance monies from the federal government. When we exclude all of our major capital revenues and expenses and this increase in the market shares value, the year-end surplus for the parish was $15,700 at the end of 2021, as compared to a deficit of $3,700 the previous year. And the key reason for this surplus was the $57,000 that we received from the Government of Canada in COVID relief assistance. My next slide, I'll focus specifically on the operations of the parish. So on slide 10, this slide, the financial numbers exclude all the major capital revenues and expenses and anything related to the markup of the shares. It also provides you with a little bit more detail on the types of expenditures that the parish incurs, for example, how much we spend on human resources, on liturgical cost, etc. It provides you a comparison to last year's numbers, and it also provides you the year-over-year percentage change. The 2021 revenues of $302,000 are approximately 24% higher than the previous year, and that's largely due to the COVID salary wage subsidy assistance from the federal government. The 2021 expenses of $286,800 are approximately 16% higher than those in the previous year. And the main contributors to that increase are increase in salary expenses. We paid more for protocols for COVID, for cleaning, cost of living increases, and overtime expenses. There was a decrease in liturgical pastoral cost, and that was mainly due to COVID shutting down all of the activities in the parish. There was an increase in diocesan taxes. We pay 13% diocesan taxes, and we had to pay an incremental tax on our COVID relief monies. And there was an increase in the cost of property maintenance, and that was largely the $17,000 for the parking lot repairs. The parish ended the year with a surplus situation, but that was due to the COVID assistance monies. The key takeaway from this slide is that our revenues and our Sunday collections are pretty much consistent year over year, but they're not keeping pace with the cost of operations of the parish. This slide also has a column on the 2022 annual budget. Part of the Finance Council's responsibilities under that governance document I mentioned is that as well as presenting to you the financial statements, we must present to both the Archdiocese and to you, the parishioners, the annual budget. Listed here for your reference is a very conservative 2022 budget that we have already submitted to the Archdiocese. We don't know what will unfold in terms of COVID impacts for anything related to future pandemic implications. We have, however, reflected a planned forecast increase in revenues of either Sunday collections or other sources of revenues of a total of $20,000. This will be required if we wish to not be in a deficit situation at the end of 2022. You'll also notice that the budget for liturgical and pastoral vitality programs has not increased. When the parish does open up and vitality programs return, this will only be feasible with increased revenues through collections and/or other types of revenue-generating activities. Slide 11 is a year-over analysis of operating expenditures. This slide and the next slide are two new graphs that we have included in our presentation this year, and they provide an analysis stemming from 2016 to the end of 2021 of the parish's expenses and revenues. This first slide shows the operating trends for the parish. We have excluded salaries and wages because they are consistently at approximately $130,000 a year. Expenses other than the maintenance cost, which are the dark blue color, and taxes, which are the dark green color, have been pretty well managed. Maintenance costs and taxes have been increasing over the last several years. An important point that I would like to note here is that you'll notice the utilities, which are in light blue, are somewhat straight-lined over the past few years, even though utility costs are increasing. We see that all in our own household budgets. The utility costs have been able to remain straight-lined, and one of the key contributing reasons for that is that we have incurred some savings in the heating cost as a result of having our new boiler. We are seeing the return on investment of those capital expenses. The second slide, slide 12, which is the year-over-year comparison of total expenditures versus total revenues, and I'd like to point out that the graphical points of the year 2016 are in the far right, and the current year, 2021, are on the left side. We see here graphically how revenues, the orange-colored lines, are decreasing over the last 6 years, and expenses, the blue-colored line, are either increasing and/or remaining constant, just under $300,000 a year. This is a concerning trend for the parish. Our average operating deficit is about $5,000 to $10,000 a year. If nothing else changes in terms of funding levels for Sunday collections or other types of revenues, we will continue to dip into our unreserved equity account that I had previously mentioned. Our general purpose equity account can sustain this for a fair bit of time into the future. However, I have a few points to make here that we all must take into consideration. First, as mentioned, the more we dip into the reserves, the less interest revenue we receive, the less income we get, and basically, exponentially, the gap widens between the revenue and expense lines, and it shortens the time frame of our equity cushion. The other elements to consider are higher inflation rates equals higher cost of operations in the future. Diocesan taxes are likely to increase. They are currently at 13%, and it's not unreasonable to assume that they will likely increase. We have an aging parishioner base. There's a likelihood of decrease in regular Sunday collections. Post-COVID resumption of activities, hopefully the growth and the vitality of the parish will increase our cost. These are all elements that will eat away at our general equity purpose account. Unless our revenues increase, our equity-based cushion will continue to decrease at a faster rate than it did in the past. Slide 13, my closing remarks. Throughout this presentation, I hope you've seen that it's evident that the parishioners are very generous for our varied charitable initiatives. On behalf of the recipients of these monies, thank you very much for your generosity. Despite 2021 being a difficult COVID year with the pandemic, from a financial perspective, St. Basil's has been able to weather the pandemic reasonably well. Thankfully for this year, the increase in operating expenses were offset by the COVID relief subsidies. We as a Finance Council would also encourage you to increase your donations in your regular Sunday collections in order to cover our operating requirements. We have prepared, as I mentioned, a 2022 bare bones balanced budget. Unless collections or other sources of revenue increase, when the vitality programs pick back up, there is no source of money for any of those increased expenditures. And lastly, thank you very much for listening and viewing this presentation. I hope you found it informative on the financial situation of the parish. If anybody has any questions on any of the line items in this presentation or any other financial implications for the parish, please don't hesitate to ask any Financial Council member. Our contact information is on the front page of the parish bulletin. Thank you very much.